Yeah, I'm live. I just sent out the link for Mark to join us here, so I imagine he'll be doing that shortly, folks. And in the interim, I guess while we wait for Mark to join the stream, by the way, shout out to everyone. Thanks for all you folks who have showed up to the stream, and I really appreciate it. This was supposed to happen last weekend. Something unfortunately came up, so I had to postpone. But we're going to get through this today for sure. And like I say, I'm really excited to hear what Mark's got to say. Obviously, as a fellow libertarian, I'm sure we'll have lots in common and similar interests. But I really do want to, have a discussion and have an interview. Well, this is going to be more like a discussion and an interview, kind of combined in one. To ask some very pressing questions, because that's the thing, that the issue that's on most minds today is, how do we get out from this kind of tyranny? What are the steps that can be taken? Now, I know there are lots of steps that are personal that can be taken, but today we're going to be talking about, is there a political solution? Is there we know there's a political party, the Ontario Libertarian Party, and of course there's the federal Libertarian Party that has been around. And in Canada, some of you folks have probably watched my past interviews with the former leader of the federal Libertarian Party, Tim Mullen. And as we know, at the very least, there is a dedicated group of individuals in this country who every election season choose to step up the plate, even knowing, right, that they're up against a behemoth, right? But their tireless efforts, continue on. They persist, even knowing that the establishment, the status quo, and especially in Canada's first past the post type election system. Remember that? Actually, remember that Trudeau, when he first was coming into power or vying to become the leader of this country, how he said, this is going to be the last election under the first past the post system. Well, actually, that's one area where obviously he lied. I mean, well, that's not just one area where he lied, but that's one area where, not just at the federal level, but if that was something that how politics played in this country, that even in places such as Ontario, you could have, based on, if you had, something akin to proportional representation, you could have, someone such as the leader of the Libertarian Party, someone such as Mark Snow, out there and actually being able to get their voice, getting access to that bully pulpit, right? That the rest of the establishment have access to. And that's something that's really important, because the messaging behind libertarianism, although I don't prefer to use that term, it's libertarian to me. I deal with the philosophy of liberty, right? But if you get the information and those underlying principles out there to Canadians, I would expect, and I'm sure you would as well, that most of them would actually agree. The problem, what we see today, is the ruling establishment, the political parties, and their counterparts in the media constantly deride or insult or misrepresent anyone who may challenge, the status quo or the establishment. And that's what they do for libertarians. Libertarians, we're basically put in with, and labeled with what, like far right or Nazis, or which obviously is so right against everything that libertarians stand for. It's baseless insults and accusations, but they stick, and they do their job as intended for the most part, which is why most Canadians, even though there is a libertarian option out there and a choice and a party waiting in the wings, right, to help at least try to shift things more towards freedom and liberty in this country. Like I say, most Canadians are not even aware that such a party exists in this country. Actually, let me go back over there to see what's going on here with Mark here. I sent him the message, or I wonder if I have to send that to him. No, it should be just on the old Facebook page. I don't think we were communicating by email. Pretty sure it was through the old messenger. Let me just double check and confirm. I don't see anything there. And my time was correct, right? The timing should have been correct. Let me just double check on that. Okay. Well, no, it should. We should be good to go. Let me go into something else here just to make sure. Just to make sure. There's a couple different ways you can get messages through Facebook. Nope, there's nothing there either. Huh. All right. Let me close that up. Okay. Sorry, folks. I'm trying here. There we go. Here's the link. So I sent the link. I wonder if perhaps he was thinking of a different time. Although I made it aware what the time should have been. Anyways, let's see. At least we got a few people in the chat here that I can check on while we wait here. So we got Christian Delorme. Good day, sir. Good day to you. Good day, Christian. Thank you for joining the stream. Hopefully, Mark will be along with us shortly. Another non-lefty party, just what Ontario needs. The Liberals will be back in yet. Another non-lefty. Actually, the Libertarian Party would not be considered left or right. If you actually, that's one thing I will say about the Libertarian Party is it's really hard to define it on that along that left-right axis, right? It does because in terms of social policies, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's very left, very far left," in terms of like freedom for minority rights, LGBT, like people who have different choices and preference in their social lives, right? Libertarians respect and adhere to the fundamentals of freedom, which is you respect other people's choices as long as they're not infringing on other people's rights and freedoms, right? And then, of course, on the economic side of the things, you would say that we make conservatives look really bad, right? Right? Because on the conservative side of things, libertarians don't make exceptions or exemptions or exceptions, right? When they say, balance in a budget, that's a real term. It should actually mean something, or not spending outside of your means, right? Because that's the thing when you talk about economics at the basis, at the core of economics, it places a value on we human beings and the labor, the things that we provide, not just in terms of goods, but services. So our intellect, ideas, businesses, entrepreneurs, the ideas they do to create. I mean, Elon Musk, come up with some really great ideas, right? And of course, it took a whole lot of other people to help bring those ideas to fruition in the real world. But once again, that's the beauty of on the economic side of things is economics has a very, very profound role on the value that we place on each other in the economic sphere, but even outside of that as well. Because it's not just baseline economics that you're talking about when you're talking about value. Value is a very important subject matter to actually talk about. And of course, it's pertains to economics, but also pertains to social values as well. So, but once again, back to the basics here for libertarians is we just take a principle, right? We build and expand upon that principle and we universalize it. We just don't make exceptions, right? Now, when you talk about taxation as a perfect example, there's no exception. There's no, well, it's okay to steal 10% of somebody's income, right? No, if you agree that the underlying principle of theft, taking money from people without their express or implied permission, if you agree that that's an immoral or unjust act, then it has to be universal, right? You can't make excuses, right? Which is basically what the political class has done, which has brought us to this day that we're living in today, where people have soiled their principles to the point where liberals are no longer liberals, conservatives are no longer conservatives. And to be honest with you, in reality, libertarians, like I say, they don't fit neatly or nicely into one of these little boxes. I would suggest that most people that I've ever talked to in my life, unless they were hiding their true intentions or feelings, or at least the way they treated me and interacted with me was based on libertarian principles. The overwhelming majority of us, most of us, every interaction we, get involved with strangers or even people among us in our community or that we know or are familiar with us, our interactions with them are voluntary. We don't choose to use force as a means to our end, typically, right? And those are the kind of relationships that, we really hold near and dear to our hearts. Where things break down, obviously, is the minute you do choose to use force as your means to an end. And that's the thing. Libertarians don't ever make that exception, right? Not preemptively, as a means of defense, to defend yourself, for sure, but not as a means to get what you want. And this is the part where, like I say, conservatives and liberals and the NDP, right, the Green Party, all these establishment parties, they have issues. They have serious issues with because they say one thing, but they don't, when the rubber hits the road, nothing actually lines up with their premises or their so-called positions or their principles or their platform for that matter. But I get what you're saying. Just what I'm hearing, the liberals would be, so I get what you're saying. So like that would split people that you would say are on the right side of the political spectrum. And if you do that split, and I agree with you, that definitely, will possibly have that effect. But that's the thing. Every time when people do bring that stuff up, and I do appreciate you bringing that up there, anti-woke, but what is my next question to you would be, but okay, what is your option, right? Because maintain the status quo or worrying about, picking picking the lessers of evils and not doing the right thing. That's the same thing. That's why we're in the position we are in today, right? Is worried about choosing an outsider or someone who doesn't represent the establishment, right? Something that we're not familiar with. It's scary. I get it. It's scary for people. And of course, there's always the fear that, well, what about if you split the vote on the right, let's say, then, the left will win, like the Trudeau liberals. Well, yeah, but see, that's the problem right then and there, right? And I get it. There's really difficult issues with trying to find a solution. But like I say, continuing to maintain the status quo in the establishment, well, that's been taking place for, decades now. And how well has that worked out for you, right? Not so good. Not for conservatives, not for liberals, right? Not even for the environmentalists. I mean, think about it. They're all out there complaining. Liberals are complaining that they're not having enough of their whatever kind of freedoms or whatever they claim that they want, right? And conservatives are out there complaining. The liberals or the NDP, they're the socialist types, they're complaining. The environmentalists are complaining. So nobody's getting what they want at the end of the day here. So once again, what's an option? What's an alternative? Anyways, like I said, I'll just move on and check with a couple more of the comments there. But yeah, I appreciate your comment there, anti-woke. Representative government would work to get libertarians a foothold. Yes, proportional representation definitely, I believe, would be that opportunity, that getting your foot in the door, at least for libertarian politicians, right? Because yes, if you could, to me, I really enjoy hearing people like Pierre Poilievre, and something I never really listened to before was, and the only good thing that I could say that came as a consequence of the Emergency Act invocation by the Trudeau Liberals was hearing some of the testimony of a couple of the senators in the Senate in Canada and saying some really great things. Most Canadians wouldn't be privy to that kind of information, though. This is, like I say, this information is vital, right? If you want to have a clear thinking population, if you want to have freedom front and center in your society, then you have to have a citizenry of people who are properly and well informed, right? That's not what we're seeing today. What we're seeing today are people who are taught to believe it's either left versus right, cons versus libs, right? Maple Leafs versus the Canadians. No, but you get what I'm saying here, right? And yeah, it's soul crushing, especially for that large majority. I remember even back, was it when the Harper was winning, for the Conservatives, or it might have been when the Liberals, but there's basically about a 40%, roughly in and around there, 40% of the adult population in this country who don't even choose to vote. So I believe at the time there was, at that particular time, so it must have been back when the Harper regime was in power. I believe at that time there was about 24 to 25 million Canadians, adult Canadians, who were eligible to vote. And out of that 24 million, 14 million of them actually chose to vote. But that tells you that 10 million of them, which I believe represents about 40% of that population, 10 million choose not to vote for anybody. And if you break down, the support for all the parties, so at the time, let's say the Conservatives got 6 million votes and the Liberals got 5 million and something, and then, how it breaks down with everyone else, right? And that represented that 14 million. But if you think about it, the winning party at the time, like I say, whether you're talking about the Liberals or the Conservatives, let's say they win, 6 million, get 6 million votes. And that's typically in and around that 5 to 6 million votes out of that grand total that will give you what, whether it's your minority or majority. So higher on that million or lower, depending on if you get a majority or minority government. But once again, that number, that 6 million, pales in comparison to the 10 million Canadians who sit on the sidelines and don't actively participate at all. Now, one part of me, the purest libertarian in me, very thankful for these people who are not choosing to participate in the process of picking rulers, right, to control my social or economic futures, right? I'm really appreciative that in one hand, in one regard, but on the other side of that, and once again, this is the part where I have an issue with and a conflict in my own mind is, but boy, if there was an actual choice for liberty on the ballot, right? And those 10 million Canadians were privy and aware of that choice, would that entice them to maybe enter into politics, not as a means for political activism in the sense of using politics to club or clobber your opponent, but as a means in defense or to protect your freedoms, right? Because that's one area where I can see where, like I say, people could come together, and especially if it's under the pretense of a platform such as libertarianism, where you're genuinely going to give all people. So like I say, under the libertarian platform, greenies, you get all the freedom to be as environmentalist as you want. You just don't get to force that on other people. The socialists, the NDP, you can create as much socialist or as many socialist endeavors as you want. You just can't force me to participate, right? Or conservatives. That's the beautiful thing about a libertarian platform is each faction or people, whatever people in the country that align with a particular faction or political party, that's a beautiful thing about freedom and liberty at the individual level is you do you and I get to do me. That's the beautiful thing. The problem with the way politics is done today, like I say, it's a winner takes all, loser, too bad, so sad kind of situation, and especially in Canada's first past the post system. Anyway, sorry, a little bit of a long rant there. Let me just check here. Like I say, send another message. Oh wait, now I get Scott Marshall sent a message, and I believe he works for Mark Snow and is part of the Ontario Libertarian Party. So I'm going to assume that there's probably an issue here. So let me just check on that, folks. Give me 1 second here. I'm here and can talk until Mark arrives. Okay. Okay, I'll send the link to him. Okay, so just 1 sec there, folks. Copy to clipboard. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Here is the link. Okay, so we're going to get Scott Marshall. So he's going to be stepping in to speak on Mark's behalf or to discuss a couple of the aspects that we want to talk about in regards to the Libertarian Party platform. So that's good to know. Excellent. Let me get back here once again while we're waiting for Scott to join. Representative government would work to get, oh, okay, yes, so I already read that one. Yes, far right raises sexist puppy killers. Anybody right at you? Yeah, the old label or okay, but I doubt the powers that be allow it. That's an issue, obviously. Boomer moment. Yeah, boomer moment. That's I don't know. That's kind of a thing. It might end up being part of the English vernacular at some point in time. I know it's It's usually, and it's quite an insult typically, the boomer moment. Whoop, I had a boomer moment, right? I hear it a lot. I've even used it myself. My bad. Sorry. Anyways, so let's get back on the woke here. Trudeau campaigned a bit on representative government. Then they ran the numbers, and his under 40% of the popular vote did not look good for that. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it sounded good in theory. Putting it in practice would have meant that he would have, had some real challengers, right? So yeah, he's not a big fan of that one. Yeah, government don't like competition. Imagine that. Authoritarians, tyrants. Yeah, they don't like competition. Never have and never will. Hence, non-left, non-mainstream media endorsed. Yeah, yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I sent you the link on Facebook there, Scott. Thank you very much, man. I'm available and could talk with you till Mark can get it. Yeah, no problem. Like I said, I sent the link to you over there on Facebook. That message that you sent me there on my Canadian Libertarian page. I sent the reply to you. Okay, what do we got here? Kid Sykes. What's going on, Kid Sykes? Dangerous freedom is always and infinitely better than secure slavery. Yeah, yeah. I'm right there with you. It's crazy that, and that really should not be a controversial statement, right? But sadly enough, in Canada's current state of affairs, saying such a thing is a controversial thing. That's strange days indeed. But once again, what's the thing I keep thinking, right? I kind of go through peaks and valleys in terms of when I get to really thinking deeply about these. But you know what? As crazy as these times seem to be right now, really, could they be absolutely normal times and have the ability or the opportunity to affect real change? Probably not, right? Things probably have to. And I've always kind of suspected this all along, just based on living in the real world and my own anecdotal experiences. Yeah, chances are, and every time I've ever, had to go through a really difficult change was because things were bad, right? And like I say, it required things to get really bad for me to actually, want to put in the effort to want to affect real positive change, right? So perhaps that's the time we're living in today. Is it looks bad and it's not good for our mental health and our psychology in the short term, but it may very well prove to be beneficial in the long term if we remain dedicated and committed to standing up for the ideals of liberty. Because that's the thing, folks. Our opponents are 100% not only dedicated, committed to continuing to espouse their rhetoric and promote the state, but they have a whole lot of actual economic power to back them up as well, which is one area, once again, where, like I say, those of us who are trying to challenge the status quo and the establishment, yeah, we not only do we need the voices, but we need a little bit of economic clout on our side as well. Right? Would really help. Money matters for some people that talk about money as if it just doesn't mean anything. Oh, money is the worst thing or the root of all evil. No, it's really, really, really not. It's really not. Okay, so where are we at here? Okay, let's see. The option is to abandon. Oh, there we go. I think we got Mark there now. Just one sec there, folks. I'm just going to bring Mark in here. Okay.
Okay, Scotty, hey, thank you. Oh my God, what a nightmare!
What happened, my friend?
Well, first of all, I thought it was at 3:00, and second of all, you think that I could find where this was on my phone? It took my campaign director to send me the email, and I can't find an email in any of my 3 or 4 email accounts for this, and I do apologize right up front. I do apologize. Sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Not a worry at all. Not a worry at all. It's not been that long anyways. You're just shortly, it's only been a few minutes. And there's always, for me, I'm fortunate enough that I usually got lots of people that are willing to engage in conversation anyways in the chat. So it's not a hard thing to do that. But thanks for coming on today, Mark. I really appreciate that. And like I say, the one thing I was thinking about to start this conversation is maybe just give yourself, or this interview, just give yourself a quick introduction, because I don't even think I'm sure we've interacted before, in text form, but I don't think we've actually had an actual conversation in a video form or long form live streams such as this before. So I'm actually curious. I'm going to be learning just as much about you as anyone else that's in the chat. So this is great. So like I say, if you just want to start out with, basically your background and what got you to want to be the leader of the Ontario Libertarian Party.
Well, I was a kid from Nova Scotia that was heading down the wrong path, and when I was 17, a judge said to me, "Hey, you think you should join the army because you're not going in a good place." So that's what I did. I was an aimless kid that got a purpose. I spent 30 years in the army in uniform and deployed all over the world. And when I was released in 2011 for my injuries, I found my voice because I'd always been, at 17, you just do what you're told when you're in the army, and you never question anything. When I got out and became a civilian, I started questioning everything. And I worked with Pierre Poilievre and his team in regards to working on the new Veterans Charter issues, in which there were 17 of us that worked towards putting together changes to help the veterans. And they never used any of our recommendations that we had, and they just completely went and did their own thing. And at that point, I was like, what's going on in the world? Why is politics like this? This was 2012, 2013. And I was like so disillusioned with politics that I literally turned off of it. And then about a year later, I seen a message from the Libertarians, and I thought, oh God, who are these people, And the more I read, the more I learned about my charter rights, the more I learned about property rights, the more I just, it was kind of like this great awakening of someone who's been told for years that you have rights, but when you actually look into it, you don't have rights. And it was about 2015, I joined the party, ran as a candidate in 2018, ran for the leadership when Alan Small, a very good man, retired in 2019 against Keith Komar. I lost by 2 votes. And when Keith stepped down this past February, we had another leadership convention in October. And at that point, I was elected the leader. So really behind the 8 ball in the sense of getting organized. But we've come so far since October. And we have about 60 slotted candidates right now. And we're hoping that the big push for this month starts producing more candidates. And by all means, just sign a thing that I believe in freedom and liberty, and you can be a libertarian candidate and have a voice and at least vote for one person that actually will do something yourself.
Yeah.
So that's my life story. I'm married. I have 2 children. I live out in the country. After my retirement posting was in Barhaven in Nepean. And my wife and I have always been farmers, and that's what my life is now, a farmer. I want to be a farmer, produce as much of my own food, be as self-sufficient as possible.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Mark. Actually, that's great, because now some of the things that you mentioned, one in particular that sticks out to me, because it resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with lots of people that are in the chat, is this whole thing towards the libertarian. And just like myself, I come from a religious family, growing up, obviously. And whether it was in the religious aspects or even in the schools growing up, it was constantly, everything I was taught. And then, of course, it progressed as I became older and became an adult. But I always took issue. And of course, just like you, when you're younger, you don't know how to question these things. You're still just trying to navigate the world. But to me, consistency, right, is really, really important. And that was the thing with me, and even in the religious communities. Now, obviously that doesn't have anything to do with the abstract entity we call God, but the actual physical places, the churches, the people who represented them. I would see a lot of the times, like there's, you go to the church and you hear like some of the teachings of the Bible and some of the verses, and they sound so great and they're so moral and ethical, and they take such principled stance. But then you would see some of these characters and figures that once they left the church would be complete hypocritical in their own personal lives, right? They say what? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I never knew religion, and I found, quote, Jesus at age 23.
Right.
And I was a Jimmy Swaggart follower, sending money and all that stuff. And religion is something that is personal for each and every person. You don't need to follow anybody if you follow your God. Right. If you live a good life, if you try to help, sort of like the libertarian idea of voluntarism, not corporate charity is what we have now. We used to have voluntary community supports, and now that's all been taken away for a Big Mac at McDonald's. That McDonald's gets a tax for when you donate. I support anybody to have their own religion. I support any religion. I support anything that is individualistic in nature, whether it be LGBT, whatever your particular need to be as a person and exist in this world and have beliefs in something, whether it be, like I say, religions, politics, and all that stuff. I support anybody that supports a liberal, a conservative, an NDP, because even the Communist Party, I support them, because you should have that right without any conditions whatsoever, as long as you're not harming or aggressing against anybody else.
Right.
As for religion, I kind of fell out of it, like the mustard seed on the pathway. I wasn't well rooted in it. And then I went on a 3 to almost 5 year study of every different type of religion that was out there. Not that I converted to any. And some of the missions I seen people kill each other for religion. And I thought, there's no religion in the world that actually really wants to kill people in their fundamental teachings. You don't want to kill people. Most of them are charitable and helpful.
Yeah.
And, you could say being a sports football guy or a baseball guy, that's a religion. When you sign on to that, or being the best welder in the world, or being the best priest in the world, or being the best politician in the world. And what I found was that as long as I live a good life, help people, and try to be just the best person I can without harming other people, if there is a God, whichever God that might be, that maybe I will get into that kingdom of heaven, whichever that is, or maybe I'll go in hell for some of the things that I did in my career. But at the end of the day, we just have to have a society that really looks after each other more and doesn't rely on what I call corporate charity, because corporate charity is really foundational support, which supports takes so much away, just like government, in that sense that it takes a lot of the money that's taken in and used for administration, and smaller and smaller. Whereas we used to have community supports, Kiwanis, Shriners, all these things that used to actually use the money within communities, we've now taken it and made it into corporation charitable funds that have boards of directors and foundation support, and we need to get back to individual charity works and local charity works, because charity begins with your next door neighbor. It extends down your street. It goes to your community, and at the end of the day, it goes to your city. And if you do the first thing first, which is be charitable to your neighbor, you will have 100% impact. Yeah,
for sure. And actually that I tend to be long-winded at times, but I guess where I was going with that, with the whole religious thing, is I was going to also lean towards what I seen in the political realm too. So today it correlated with my experiences when I was younger with some of these religious institutions, but I seen the same kind of similarities with today. So today I see liberals who are anything but liberal. I see conservatives who are anything but conservative, right? So this is what I'm saying. What I seen growing up and even as adult is some of these institutions seem to be quite hypocritical. But what I noticed was the people that were the leaders of these particular organizations or institutions were quite hypocritical and were not willing to follow the very principles that they promote or espouse themselves. And that's the one area with libertarianism, just like you, when I started to learn about libertarianism, I believe that was back in 2008 when Ron Paul was running for election in the US, was I got to see that with the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, and property rights, these principles are universalized and they're consistent. And the kind of people who want to claim themselves as libertarians seem to be really strict adherence to their principles. And to me, that is of fundamental importance to me, because especially in the realm of politics in particular, is really hard to know who you can trust, because how many times do we hear people espouse certain things from political parties and they get in power and do the exact opposite? Whereas with libertarians, all I have ever seen, and that's even among libertarians arguing among themselves, is this constant, the only battle I ever seen internal arguments or discussions with libertarians is who can be the most strict in adhering to the principles. So that's a kind of rather noteworthy goal that I see that is separates libertarians from most people who want to enter into politics. Is to them, it's their principles that they hold near and dear and what drives them, rather than just the sense of, oh, I can get myself a position of power or get a pension, a gold-plated pension for a while. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that. But then there was a few other things, like I say. So we want to start out, because your platform, like I say, I think it's great. So the first question I had for you, and this is going to be a bit, is, I guess, in your own words, because I know you have the big letter on the Ontario Libertarian Party from that lady from back in whatever it was there that had the big write-up. And it's a great write-up for sure. But in your own words, so anyone here that's watching today, if they're just new to libertarianism, what, for you in your own words, what is libertarianism?
Straight up, what it is reducing the amount of power or control the state has over individuals. And libertarians believe in the ability for you to be able to provide for yourself, in the sense that you get to keep all of your own earnings and your own destiny. And you get to control as much of that, whether it be healthcare, education, property rights. To go back to your further point that you were saying, the state of libertarianism is property rights and individual rights. Those two principles are fundamentally the core of what freedom and democracy is. If you own your property, then the state can't aggress upon it. If you actually own the property, like in Texas, you own from the sky to the ground and everything right down to the core of the earth. And if you find oil, it's yours. Well, we have no property rights, or very, very limited property rights in Canada. So if you want to build a house, you have to get a permit. If you want to do this, you have to do, there's all these rules and regulations in regards that interfere with a person's ability to be as successful in life as possible. Taxation is a perfect example of that. Taxation takes from your earnings, right? But property rights, if you own your property, both person and property, then the government can't tell you what to do. That doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. It just means that the government's authority stops at your property. The government's authority stops at your body. If you want to take, I don't know, cocaine, then go ahead and take cocaine. Do I do it? No. If you want to live in a mud brick house heated with baby seal oil killed off the coast of Newfoundland, and that's how you want to live your life, then by all means, go ahead and do that. Not that I would say that that's a good thing, but that kind of principle of just understanding. If you bought 5 acres of land and decided to put an RV on it and a bunch of solar panels, you can't live in it. You're not allowed to live in an RV on your own property, which isn't your property. So, I mean, how do people even build wealth like our parents did, or like I did when we had more rights and less taxation? Today, how do we expect a 19 or 20-year-old to come up with $30,000 for a down payment on a $500,000 house? That's inflationary policy, fiat money. That's a whole other side of the world that we can talk about. But how are we supposed to do that when we're taking 42 cents of every dollar that a kid making $15 an hour earns in one form of taxation or another? Yeah. And we want to reduce the power of government from a decentralized planning to a localized planning. As a representative of a riding, then you should be able to go to your riding and say, listen, I have a problem, and that riding and that association and that community that you live in should be able to resolve its own problems, not a centrally planned Toronto permission. I'll give you an example of that. If you have a problem with your municipal property tax assessment corporation increase that they put on you this year, well, you have to go all the way to Toronto, where you should be able to go to your local MP and say, hey, listen, why did you raise my taxes this year? Everybody gets to pass the buck from your local council to your local MPP, and you get talking to somebody down in Toronto that has no impact on your local community. Decentralizing as much of the Ontario government as possible, pushing it back out to regional control. Why don't we have a region of Ottawa for exactly Ottawa specific problems? Toronto problems are different. North Bay problems are different. And why do we need a one size fits all government to do that? What we need is a government that puts in place good policies and gets rid of the debt and allows local power to be actually in power.
Right. And actually, I'm glad you kind of led that way, because that's the area where I'm at now. So let's do a hypothetical thought experiment here. So let's say you did, the Ontario Libertarian Party did gain a tremendous amount of traction. And whether it's this election or at any election, you did, gain enough of support where you actually did, form a government and you had the ability to get some actual things done. My question would be, what would be one of the first actions that you could do as a leader of the governing political party? What could you do? What would be one of the first acts you would do to actually give those freedoms to people that you were talking about?
Oh, one of a dozen that I would do right away. But right off the bat, in accordance with our principles about property ownership, I would eliminate the Municipal Property Act. I would eliminate the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. I would eliminate conservation authorities and any authority that they had. I would deregulate all of the centralized power in regards to property. That's the first thing that I would do if I had a majority government and can do that. The second thing that I would do is take all of our services, primarily healthcare and education, and I would switch the way the funding works. Right now, it's all centrally planned. Just like in our 2018 platform, we would allow people, I don't like to use the word allow, but we've had it for 100 years and it's not going away and it'll take more years to get rid of it. But a politician can go around and say, like they have for the last 6 elections, that I'm going to fix healthcare, I'm going to fix education. And they don't, because they control the funds. I'll just pick education as an example. If I were to say to every parent in Ontario that the value of your child's education is approximately $12,400, here's a box that you will check. If you're happy with your local public or Catholic school down the road, then you check that box and 100% of that funding goes towards that school or that system in that area. What does that do? It takes away my ability as the politician to make any impact on your decisions. If you want public or private, now you can send your kids to a Montessori school, which is about $10,800, right? It'll breed competition, it'll breed improvements, but more importantly, the parents will be in charge of it. And I can no longer make promises about how to fix it because everybody's been trying to make promises. We need to throw more money at it. Listen, our healthcare budget has $74 billion in it. $74 billion. In 2018, it was $62 billion, and it is failing right now.
Right.
It is absolutely failing.
So what I heard from you, which is actually the answer I was hoping I would get, is you're just basically going to give, that reign of freedom back to the actual people so that they can make that determination and those decisions themselves. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm just going to bring here, this is so for the folks that are watching here. So this is the Ontario Charter of Rights and Freedoms. If it were actually written and enshrined in law by the Ontario Libertarian Party. And I got to tell you, folks, it's much, much superior. And this is the part, let me just, there we go. I'm just trying to zoom up on the text here so that it's easier for everyone to see here. But this is one area where I say, where no matter where you align with on the political spectrum, is this kind of the wording within this document is so much more conducive for creating that realm of freedom that we all cherish. Like I say, I would suggest anyone cherishes their freedoms. The problem that we seem to have is some people don't cherish other people's freedoms, but that's the thing. We don't have to worry about benevolence if you live in a world where you actually respect each other's freedom. So let's just read, like I say, this democratic rights, I believe was the one that I was reading earlier for preparation here. And I thought this was great. So under the democratic rights here, 6.1, every citizen has the right to participate or not in elections and referenda, which involves choices pertaining to public policies and or political representation and lawmaking within the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Every citizen has the right to participate in public programs and receive government services, provided that he or she make the voluntary choices to make the required financial payments, which would be obviously taxation, permits, or fees, and to comply with the associated laws and regulations. 7.1, every citizen has the right to refuse participation in any public program or to refuse any defined government service. By refusal, the citizen is absolved from any and all obligations to make related financial payments, taxes, permits, fees, or submit to any of the laws or regulations of the programs or services that have been refused. And to me, like, that is just so profoundly important. in this country that is genuinely diverse with, as we see, a lot of different kind of cultures that want to function within this country, right? And I think this part of the document alone would alleviate a lot of the fighting, a lot of the bickering, a lot of the use of government as a means to the end, or a mean to batter their opponents, if you had this kind of actual enshrined and inherent rights and the ability to opt out of the system. Because I'll just say, I'll speak for myself, I would choose to opt out of some of these government programs and use that, maybe that purchasing power, that money that I would save, to maybe put towards other initiatives that are maybe along the same lines, whether it be education or healthcare. And like I say, offer a little bit more competition. And once again, to me, that's a beneficial thing for everybody. So even those who are benefit right now, or think they're benefit or support the socialized healthcare system, well, if people like myself, can not just create other alternatives, but once again, not be using up your system or your resources in your system. Like I say, that's a net benefit for you, and it'd be a net benefit for me, and a positive net benefit for other people by sheer fact that I can now use my disposable resources to create some other area of competition in that particular part of the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of thought process went into this. I've actually lost a few libertarian members because it still states that the government is in control. But you're right in what our attempt and what we want to portray is that you don't really have rights. And in Ontario, if we can guarantee those rights through an Ontario-based Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it was actually wrote in the same vein as the rights that Quebec has as a independent province within the Confederation of Canada provinces. So we took a really good look at what Quebec had separate rights from the rest of Canadians. Quebec has never signed the charter or the Constitution, so they still have maintained their civil code, tax laws, and a bunch of other healthcare laws that nobody else has. So when we looked at that and we decided to come up with this document, it was to codify and to put forth the proposal of an Ontario Charter of Rights and Freedoms that said that we want to be part of the Canadian Federation, but we as Ontarians want to have more rights and freedoms and less federal interference in our lives. And that's the purpose of that document. Is it completely doable? Yes, it is. Everything's doable. I mean, if anything, you can tell the amount of restrictions on our rights that the government can do whatever they want. So yeah. Would I push that forward and vote on it? Yes, I would. Would there be lots of challenges and stuff like that? Sure, there would, but that's fine. If we can create the noise for people to want an appetite for freedom,
yeah,
definitely what happened up on the Hill this year has really awakened people's idea of their sense of what we had for rights and what we don't have. That's a huge underlying current of people thought we were free, and now we know we are not free. So yeah, it was designed as a premise to have that conversation for us to be able to promote the idea of freedom and promote and write words that would actually have meaning, as you described, that says that you have the right to participate. And if you don't want to participate, then don't. Yeah. Myself, personally, I think I would keep OHIP because I believe in the system of OHIP, but I don't believe in the taxation for it. But
right.
We're not getting rid of it in 24 hours. We won't get rid of it in 20 years. Yeah. But what we can do is control the funding and allow people to make choices. And by centralizing that funding in your local health region, you're actually going to get 50%, 51% more funding to do that job.
Yeah, actually, I do want to reply and respond to actually what you're saying, because I think there's other people that would probably want to hear this as well. Is like when you're saying you've lost some libertarians. Well, over the years, and like I say, this has been well over a decade for me, and I've had a lot of, debates, discussions with fellow libertarians, and I went from my journey. It was kind of a strange journey, but because to me the most important thing is the pursuit of actual gaining the things that I want to see or perceive in terms of freedom and liberty. So I started out, learn about the minarchist side of things, of limited government libertarianism and stuff. And then you follow and extrapolate the principles, and you take them out to the point, well, actually, you can't have any, if you actually extrapolate those principles, you can't actually have any legitimate government. And it's an honest and truthful statement. But at the same time, we also have to recognize, and I'm sure you do and I do, is this is the world we have to function. So I've gone back to being more pragmatic, actually, and I'm actually feeling some pushback like yourself. But this is the thing, I have to navigate in this real world. I love the idealism, and I love my idealistic fellow libertarians. Listen, these are the kind of people that I would genuinely want to surround myself for the most part. But like I keep trying to remind them, and I get a lot of pushback myself, is we function in the real world. Statism is a real in the authority of the state. It is enshrined. It's in their mind. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. We're not going to have a mass uh, psychological moment where we're going to put everyone under some kind of hypnosis and somehow wipe their minds of statism. No, like you say, but what we can do is be 100% honest and forthright with people, deal with those very pressing questions, acknowledge the fact, like I just acknowledged there is no way to, like, there is no mathematical, scientific, or objective way to get to being able to have a legitimate way of picking a ruler that gets to control. There's no way. To me, government is not legitimate under its current form or its past incarnations either. But rather than going around trying to convince people to not believe in the state, which is, like I say, I use the excuse, or I tell people all the time, yeah, try doing that. Like even myself would try to tell religious people to not believe in God, right? It's a really difficult thing to do. So same with status, with believing in government as their benevolent overlord, let's say. But to me, yeah, the most important thing is get people like yourself who are willing to take these pragmatic steps, but at the same time, being the kind of people who will stick to and adhere to those principles while you are taking fellow Canadians or Ontarians, in your example, down that journey. That to me is a beautiful thing. That builds rapport, it builds trust, right? And it builds that sense of community that we're all longing for. And it means you don't have to sacrifice. I don't have to sacrifice being who I am. You don't have to sacrifice being who you are. We just have to not use force or the state to batter each other over the head with. And I think the Ontario Libertarian approach and that platform and even your Charter rights is something that, I mean, if you took that message around to Ontarians, and I'm sure that's probably what you're doing now, and you probably have people do that's it. That's actually one of my questions now is actually, let me just move into that. What are you doing to get that message? Because like I say, I know that kind of message will resonate with a tremendous amount of Ontarians out there. But how the heck do you get that message when we have so many gatekeepers doing their best to prevent us from even being able to do so?
One protest at a time. That's the only way I can get it. We write press releases to say this is what we're doing. 2018, we spent all kinds of money on radio and print ads and all that stuff. And we were completely shut out of the mainstream media. We ran 117 candidates. That should have been huge political news in Ontario. And it wasn't. And we were shut out. You cannot say any other way that, when the Green Party achieved, 80, 90 candidates, it was like all over the news. We had more than the Liberals and more than the Greens and more than the Conservatives running in 2018, and the media didn't speak about us. So, I was interviewed by every major news, including Fox News, on Parliament Hill during the Freedom Convoy protests, and not one of those have ever come to light. But these kind of things, you hosting these, all the feeds that we do, all the sharing that we do on social media, these are how we do it, because we're never going to get in unless I did something really stupid and ended up being a negative news story. That's how they would portray us.
Yeah.
And I would take some negative news right now just for the simple fact to get it onto the mainstream media platforms. But I don't even think that even if we, I don't know, did something outrageous, drove jet skis down the middle of Parliament Hill, right? Something like that to say that, or I don't know, march down the middle of the 401 or something. I just don't think it would be covered, because they just don't want us to exist. And you did say, what are libertarians? And, one of the other things that comes back that I find as I'm becoming more self-sufficient, anarchy. Anarchy used to mean something different to me than what it does now. Anarchy used to mean that the total lack of state, no police and everything else like that, and everybody rules and runs around and does whatever the hell they want. That's how some people are viewed. That's how I'm attacked as a libertarian. You're going to destroy everything that we have. I have a different view of anarchy now. Anarchy is self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
if you can grow and produce most of what you can need in this world, and I don't know, have solar power like I do, and have wood from your land to be able to heat your house, then you're not participating in the system anymore, and that's a threat to the system. That's anarchy, not the guys jumping on police cars. That's anarchy. When you are self-sufficient, then you are no longer dependent upon the government for your hydro, for your heat, for your health care in that sense. If you are self-sufficient, that's anarchy, because governments would hate people to be self-sufficient, because you'd stop paying into the taxes when you do consumption, go to the grocery store and stuff like that. So, but we can't even get to that state until we have property rights to do so.
Right.
And that's why I keep coming back to that charter, like you spoke about, and what it means to be a libertarian. It doesn't mean destroying the system. It means that actually improving what we have and slowly giving people the option to make other choices in their lives. And this is the most logical approach that you can do when we've had, 1917, the implementation of the temporary tax. 52 cents of every dollar that you earn goes out the door federally, provincially, and municipally to some form of taxation or another. And people say, well, if you really want to help the poor, it's not $15 an hour. Don't tax people that earn $22,500 or less, because $15 an hour, mandated $15 an hour, just makes all the rest of the means of production increase, which means, yes, initially you'll get some benefit, but as everything goes up, you get nothing. But if you said that everybody that, and I'm not saying this is our policy, I'm just using it as an example. If you didn't tax anybody under $22,500, it would not cost us a single dollar in inflation. It would not cost anything for the rise in the cost of production. It would not cost gas to go up. It would not cost a loaf of bread to go up. And the poorest people would be helped the most. But nobody's talking about that. They only want to talk about $15 an hour. Exactly. And if you really want to have good governing policies, that's what you do.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Mark. And that's 100% there. Like I said, I just hope more and more, not just Ontarians, but Canadians learn some of these things. And that's really important. And like I say, the one thing I will actually, another question there is, because like you say, there's ways we can get our information out there. And of course, I'm willing to help you as much as I can. Of course, kind of the people that would tend to consume my content would typically be other libertarians anyways, for the most part. But like I say, another thing, so in addition to the platforms that we use to kind of get our message out there and how there's disruptions and gatekeepers there, but another area, like I say, that plays a huge effect on the political stage is obviously economics and having some kind of financial backing. Now, there's one area that I've actually been a little bit dismayed and kind of disheartened in recent years, of the fact that you would think that, especially the people that are entrepreneurs and are more market oriented and know that they've got a much better business model than maybe some counterparts, and they want to be able to enter into that fray. Like I say, where are the people with the financial resources? And this might speak to the larger issue with Canadian businessmen. And I do know myself, a lot of them ended up, the most entrepreneurial or the ambitious do tend to gravitate to the country to the south of us. But there are still some entrepreneurs here. But I'm wondering, where are these people with these innovative ideas that they themselves, I would assume, if they like competition and participating in the market, would be identified as libertarian themselves. Do you have any in Ontario that are actually willing to financially back the party in ways to help, like I say, the myriad of little things that political parties can do to get their messaging or their information out there?
Well, do I have any people that could help back the party? Well, they changed the rules that only individuals can donate. So corporations can't donate. All you have to do is start a third party status. Go look at the registered list of third party status for the June 2022 election. Right. Those are $750,000 social media empires that are out there advocating on social media for a particular party without actually saying their name. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have any funding for political parties. I want to simplify the process down to a regional level. But let's talk about the real economics of why Ontario is no longer the economic engine of Canada. Over the last 40 years, we have regulated, controlled, mitigated every kind of business that was a manufacturing job out of this province. So if I wanted to build a furniture manufacturing company today, I couldn't do it because the cost of the land taxes, the cost of the electricity, the cost of the labor and WSIB and all the other taxation that goes on top of it makes Ontario a non-competitive place to set up a business. And if we're going to do that, the things that we can do is to deregulate a lot of that industry. Myself personally believing in protecting the environment, which I believe every company wants to do anyway.
For sure.
Protect the environment. It is now part of the culture. It's not 40 years ago. Everybody wants to do the best that they can with the environment. Second to that, I would reduce corporate income tax down to zero. Remove WSIB and allow people to buy their own health insurance as well, workplace safety insurance, and reduce as many regulations in regards to pulling our products of resource out of the ground to be able to return us to a manufacturing base. It's very hard, even in America, to compete against the giant corporation called China in regards to the slave labor wages that they're able to pay, because they don't have none of the regulations in place and people don't really have a choice. And the standard of living is lower than a North American standard of living. But if we're going to actually get back to manufacturing goods and having blue collar jobs, that's what we have to do. Is we have to create the business climate and conditions in which it becomes profitable to run a business, which will then in turn hire employees who will then in turn pay taxes. That is new money. Borrowing money is not new money. Borrowing money is money that our children have to pay back. So the more we can increase the blue collar workforce, the better we are able to get taxation coming in. And I know that's an evil word, but like you say, the pragmatic side of the house, we have to build hope and future for the children of tomorrow to be able to have a purpose in life, to wake up. If you want to be, furniture maker or build solar, whatever it is, but we need to remove as many conditions as possible that allows business to come in and set up. Even if it means giving up free energy or cheaper rates or better rates for their write-offs of their energy costs. That's what we need to do, because the way it is now, you can't go to work and stay at that same job like we used to do 40, 50 years ago. And if you can't do that, if you don't have a manufacturing base, then you don't have the ability for people to be able to build wealth. And eventually, you name me one large industry that is private that doesn't have any subsidies from the government.
Yeah.
We pay billions of dollars in subsidies in Ontario every year to corporations. In reality, it's artificially inflating the market. And what happens is that once we've given all these subsidies to these companies, which we should be giving tax breaks to make it efficient for them to work in this, or to have a business in this product, what it does is when some new regulation comes out, they're first in line to get extra money. And all those other jobs are gone, not creating new money. And it's now become a political thing that you get money to use it as an election tool to keep your business in the province and sort of like hold the taxpayers hostage. We have to get away deregulating our resources as much as we can. We have to create a zero corporate income tax. We have to utilize as many of our own resources as we can as possible and start reducing taxes on top of that. So it's a big giant sandwich to eat, but it has to be taken one bite at a time.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, now that you're talking about that side of things, and I was just reading this morning, actually, the Globe and Mail, and I found it kind of striking that, okay, I guess it's okay, it's safe now that COVID seems to be at least subsiding or in the back window or the rearview mirror right for now, because Ukraine is front and center. But I found it striking that after these 2 years, even the lead up to COVID and then the whole thing, to now see such publications such as the Globe and Mail now coming out and saying, even before, well, let me just read the headline for you real quick here, folks. So Canada's hospital capacity crisis will remain long after the pandemic is over. To solve the country's capacity problem, experts say leaders need to find finally confront the deeper flaws in how Canada's healthcare system is structured. Now, that is one area, like I say, and I'm sure you'll have lots to say on that, Mark, is it's a major issue, and COVID brought this all to the center. Now, of course, the media for the last 2 years, well, the majority of them who represent the establishment, there's been some minor pushback from. There are some people in the establishment media who do try to push back, but they're quite small in numbers. But the typical voices that you're hearing from the established media was, oh no, it's all those unvaccinated people. The reason why all these waves of COVID, why all the outbreaks keep happening, and all these people are dying, being hospitalized, or filling up the capacity at all, is because there's just so many people who are acting irresponsible. And once again, very little attention was paid to the fact that the system, as you and I and many other Canadians are well aware of, was already faltering and failing long before COVID come to play. So if you want to just continue on with that, because I'm sure you have lots to say regarding the healthcare system.
Well, people ask me if I would have done anything different than Doug Ford in the first 6 weeks. And I don't think I would have, because we really didn't know what, and we didn't have the data in the first 6 weeks. And I don't think that you had any kind of complaint from the people of Ontario to do the right thing and the common sense thing to lock down. But that's the one aspect. Would I have locked us down for the 6 weeks? I would have not locked us down in that sense. Provincially, I would have said, it's up to your regions, do what you have to do. But we keep going back to, what is the fundamental problem of the reason for the lockdowns in the first place? It's the failure of the healthcare system to be able to have the capacity to deal with a major pandemic. That has been existing for the last 40 years. It was talked about in 2012. There was papers wrote on it in 2003 on the federal government. We've been talking about it for years. I did a complete breakdown of the Ontario budget in 2018, and it's not really changed as much, but the distribution of the funds towards frontline services and bureaucracy, it's actually there's been less bureaucracy and more money towards frontline services, but that's artificial because they've thrown more money at it. But the fundamental problem is that each individual Ontario resident has approximately $6,800 worth of cost. So if you take the budget divided by 14 million people, it's around $6,800. That doesn't sound like a lot of money to buy health insurance with. The problem is when you get down to the local level where the services are delivered within the region, is less than half of that $6,000 goes to pay for your frontline services, your doctors, your nurses, your surgical centers and stuff like that. And the rest of that money, 49% of it, it's actually went from 49% frontline to 51% administration. It's kind of flipped itself numbers wise. So now it's 51% towards frontline services and 49% to administration. But why do we need a centrally planned bureaucracy, which is about 600,000 jobs in the GTA? And that bureaucracy provides no frontline services. If you really want to streamline it, what you do is you take a 5-year program and you say, everybody who's not in a frontline service, like the old LINS model, if you're not there delivering that service, then we're going to look at your job and we're going to replace you 1 for 1. And then build that capacity within the frontline services within each one of the regions. How do you do that? You do that by eliminating that bureaucracy. There should be one check from the government to each of the regions and let the regions sort it out. But politicians won't do that because within the GTA, there's so many public servants that are in there that you could never say that because you would lose that whole voting block completely. And that's the problem, is nobody has the will to do that. I would do that because first and foremost, you would control that $6,800 and you would pick it for Eastern Ontario. So I break it back up into the regions of what the LINs were. Eastern Ontario, and all $6,800 instead of $3,482 would come in here. And I would slowly, over a period of 5 years, replace a bureaucrat with an RPN, with an RN, with a PSW, with a specialist, with an MRI machine. If you do that, you actually make the system better with the taxes that we have. And the only way that you can do that is if the people control that checkbox to say, I want all of my money for my region. And if I need to go to Toronto for a specialty service, outside of my region, then Toronto can bill my region. Believe it or not, that's the way it used to be 40 years ago. That's the way it used to be. And your regional healthcare was totally funded out of your region. And there was very little bureaucracy in the upper levels of the Ministry of Health. And we've added all these layers of bureaucracies under the last 5 governments that have actually taken away the money from the frontline services, taken it from the frontline services and paid it in the bureaucracy. That's how you fix it. Also, why can't I use my health card to go to the podiatrist down the street and swipe my card? Why can't I use that to go to the, I don't know, the guy that takes skin lesions off your head, which isn't covered, or eyeglasses? Why can't we do that? Because the money is not there. And if we return that money there in pots of money, they'll be able to actually relist those services that have been delisted. That's how you fix the healthcare system in that sense. But there's none of the 4 parties want to even talk about this. If you really want to change outcomes, you have to change the funding model and take it away from the government and put it into your local regions.
Yeah. Well, what about in addition to something like that, as another way to offer alternative options? Because I think this is something that's going to be bantered about and talked about, especially after this thing. And once tensions have wound down at least a little bit and people start thinking a little more critically about this, and we do have a large segment of the boomer cohort that's going to all be going into retirement. So this is going to be stuff that's going to be on mind and front and center for that cohort, is having some access to some private alternative. Because once again, I firmly believe that, something that's actually that has the potential to help is the ability for people to use their own private funding to use alternative services. Because what you have right now, especially because I do I even myself, I find it odd that we pay into this universalized system because, well, first of all, like I say, it literally means that, multi-millionaires get access to use up resources, the same kind. It just seems, and then of course you got the hypochondriac types. I know myself in small communities where I live, you go to these small little rural clinics, it's the same people time and time again that are at the doctor's office almost every week, right? So, but the people that want to participate in those socialist systems that like doing that, to me, it's all for it. But to me, I would suggest that there'd probably be a substantial portion of, and Ontario is a fairly wealthy province in terms of individuals that have access to quite a bit of wealth themselves, that they would probably have the ability and could afford, right, to pay for services in the private realm, which once again would at least leave some of that limited resources in the public field opened up for the public, whereas they could gravitate towards the private and, like I say, take some of the people that can afford that into the private system. And you could see, once again, at least then you would see this public-private comparison, those options being put out there, like in the public front and center for people to have real choice.
So 3 things from that. There would need to be constitutional changes on the federal level, healthcare changes, legislation on the provincial level, and then the ability for the province then to authorize through legislation. I know libertarians hate legislation, the ability to have private healthcare. Right. The reality is that anybody who's really wealthy doesn't stay in this province and wait in line. That's the reality. So when people say it's going to create a 2-tier system, no, it is not, because those that are the most wealthiest never stay in the country for their health care. They go to where the system is way better funded and way better reactive to someone paying up front. Right. Is that a bad thing? Is that should we have universal health care? Yes, we that's what we have. So how do we improve it? I'll come back to that. If we do exactly like you said, over a period of 5 years with a majority government, put in place the ability for private companies to be able to create a service of some sort in regards to healthcare, why shouldn't we, if we reverse that funding formula and put it all down, why shouldn't you be able to go in with your health card if you choose public healthcare and swipe that service and have it paid by it? Because the money's not there. That's the first reason. So if we change the funding formula to make sure that all of the money that is tagged to you for taxes in the budget goes to your local region, then you should be able to use that healthcare swipe card. If that service isn't covered publicly, then it should be paid for out of your portion of that funding. Again, we have to change that funding model, reduce the bureaucracy, and increase the amount of money going into each one of the regional areas. I call them the old LINs. They're still there in structure. And then with almost double the money overnight or over a period of 5 years, healthcare outcomes will improve. And in that 5 years, we can build the legislation to allow for private companies that people currently pay now. For those that want to keep their OHIP, you should be able to swipe that. And a lot of people will hate me saying that, but I believe in things that are achievable. Things that are achievable. And I believe this is achievable, and it will improve outcomes.
Well, that's actually a striking thing that you bring up, and that's something that Canadians have to take into account. Is even just something as simple of trying to privatize. You would think, right? But this is the problem: is over the 150 or 60 years that this country's existed. Well, not the entire time, because there was no socialized healthcare system for the first 100 of it or so. But like I say, you've seen a lot of legislation, a lot of bureaucracy, and the rules that are written. Right, even in terms at the constitutional level, that basically what you're alluding to, suggesting that you would need 2/3, and I believe Canada, is similar in terms of
Why
making.
do we need 2/3? I'm
right?
sorry.
Isn't that what it
2/3.
is? Isn't that what it is, though? Right? It's supposed to be 2/3, I believe.
Yeah,
Right?
no. I say no.
No, I agree. I agree with you, but I'm saying
Upper Canada was its own system, and Ontario was its own system.
Yeah.
And through agreements, we tried to do what was right. And the reality is we are still an independent nation or independent province within the Confederation of Canada. And we should just take whatever deemed necessary action that we have to do, irrespective of where it sits within the Confederation or the Constitution, because we have too much control on the federal level over people's individual rights and even the governance of the province of Ontario in regards to our own natural resources. Quebec is the perfect example of how you can do that. And I say that with my purest heart form, to say that we need to be more autonomous and our own ability to govern ourselves, and less need for federal intervention in our lives.
Right.
That's what we need to do.
Just to clarify, though, so obviously the technicalities in terms of what you can do to affect change in terms of the healthcare system, I get that. So if there are actual things written within the constitutions as they're set up now, and like I say, under this federalized system, if there are things that can actually prevent you, I can understand that being a limitation or a limiting factor. But I'm saying, for you personally, as the leader of the Ontario Libertarian Party, I would suggest that you would at least try or attempt to work towards allowing private enterprise in the healthcare system to take foot and to flourish within that province going forward. Is what I'm saying. At least you would be wanting to do whatever you can to help lead that province down that direction.
I would take every legal and legislative rule and regulation that I can, and eliminate as much as possible of it, to be able to put in place Ontario-based laws that would allow that to occur. It doesn't mean you have to personally take it, but if the option is there, then you can have it. And personally, irrespectively, even as a provincial party leader, I would say that I'm not worried about, I wouldn't necessarily worry about any constitutional challenge that came from it. If it was changing and making better outcomes for the province of Ontario, that is a worthy thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I would view it, is like, okay, do we need the federal government support for $10 a day daycare that Doug Ford just signed? No, we do not. No, we do not. What we need to do is go back to allowing mom and pops, which now can't do it. They can only have 2 or 3 kids when they could have 5 or 10 based on what the parents seen. Yeah. Now you can't do it. It forces them into the early childhood educators program. So why is the federal government subsidizing us? Because it's a political hot potato if they don't. Right. And that's the only reason why he agreed to it, because he knows that the left would then pound him on it, saying you don't care about Ontario children. So I'm not supporting Ford or saying that it was right. I'm just saying that this is where politics is today, that he's made a deal with the federal government for money that they have to then charge us more for, to be able to pay for this $10 a day subsidized care.
Right.
And the reality is that we shouldn't have that. We should have less taxes and more options for people to be able to not have to pay more taxes. And that tax base is not going to only affect parents, it's going to affect those without children as well. Seniors, retired people, young people, they're all going to pay that cost if they never have children. So why do we sign these unholy deals? It's only for political expediency to not be attacked over a bad policy.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to move on to my next question, but I actually just noticed I scrolled down the bottom here, and a person, Sina Allegria, has asked a question for you. Maybe you want to answer this: is how much does your let me just bring it on the screen here. How much does your party has support in Ontario looking at results of last election? Mark, do you have a site, a map with dots, offices of party members, and by clicking on them, find out members' views? So I guess this person is more or less interested to find out how much support your party had maybe during the last election, and if you
to achieve party status, you need to receive 2% of the vote. We did not receive 2% of the vote last election. If we could have got our message out, and it's not for lack of money and trying and social media and everything else like that, if we could have got one headline from any one of the newspapers or any one of the television shows, people would at least been able to see an option.
Yeah.
But we didn't get it. And we're struggling with the same thing right now. Nobody wants to talk about us. Nobody's going to cover us. Press release after press release after press release. And it's totally ignored. So we have no elected members at this point. We haven't since 1973, but that doesn't stop us from wanting to change the system and make it better, make better outcomes.
Well, I wish I had the opportunity to have my venture that I'm trying to undertake before I could have this before all this actually finally takes place with all these elections, because what I actually myself want to do, Mark, is I've been looking out to try to get some way that I could have my own. When you see the media and they have that panelists on, they bring on people, it's basically people all agreeing with each other. I've come up with, it's not exactly a new idea or anything, but I would like to venture my own little or attempt my own little venture where I bring, like a libertarian. Well, actually, you're familiar with this because I mentioned it. Anyways, and have a genuine liberal agenda, because I firmly believe that if Canadians had someone like yourself sitting up there on a panel, you actually had someone that actually took a genuine liberal perspective, a genuine conservative perspective, a genuine libertarian perspective, an environmentalist perspective, and actually heard all those people actually sit down and have vigorous discussions and debates, weren't scared of each other, right? Actually willing to sit down and engage in genuine discussion debates about big ideas. I think that would be something that would be very enticing, inviting for a lot of Canadians, because that's the one area that I see is vacant and absent out there in the political landscape, is people to just see all these ideas coming together, like the battle of ideas actually taking place. What they're used to today, what people have become accustomed to, is going to enter into little echo chambers and silos. And I got to admit, even us libertarians, we're basically in the same position where we typically function in our own little echo chambers, pat each other on the back for agreeing with each other. But yet we have the entire rest of our country that's not giving us any attention. Whereas if we had the opportunity, the option to engage, like I say, and hear this kind of boisterous debate from people like yourself, and like I say, all these people with perspectives, that to me is how you would properly educate and inform the population. You would have a much better informed population and citizens that would be much more conducive with, whether it's voting for you in particular, but they would at least be thinking more critically about what they're voting for rather than just a tribe, right? And that is something that's really important. And I wish I had that opportunity to do that so that people would see that. But we're going to work towards that kind of stuff, Mark. And like I say, anything that I can do for you libertarians. And like I say, I have my own thing that I'm always having qualms with, but I want to help out because I identify myself as libertarian, because to me, libertarian statism is antiquated and something I think is going to be relegated to the past, hopefully at some point in time. Just like, slavery or, rule by religious decree, those things, subsided and they're part of our history now. And I'm hoping statism will someday be something that we can look in the rearview mirror too. But to me, it's libertarians. And the reason why I keep hammering away and trying to help other people understand how important it is to learn about libertarianism is because in the absence of the state or religion. It's the only political or philosophy in general that is, like I say, consistent enough, that comes with an underlying basis of principle. So when you were mentioning anarchy before, I have lots of people who are friends who identify as anarchists. But when I discuss or talk to them about their underlying, where they learned their underlying morals or ethics, well, it didn't come from just being an anarchist, right? Anarchist doesn't teach you anything other than you don't accept having rulers. But the thing about libertarianism is what I see is, even for my own development from a child to an adult or even intellectually, is I see humanity making that same kind of step, right? That small step, or might even end up being a large leap, of leaving statism in the past and just using these principles that are grounded, just like with mathematics, that are grounded on reality and objective fact, as the basis to navigate their social and economic realm. Right now, historically, like I said, we had to look to deities or the state, the newest deity, as the means, where we don't need it. It's all in our head. Freedom and liberty, it can all reside in our own heads, just by understanding that underlying philosophy. So to me, libertarianism is the future. And actually, before I continue, so education was the next one. So that, talking about this future, because that's where this I'm tying this into. So knowing that obviously having a well-informed and enlightened and engaged populace that thinking critically about these things, education is obviously a very important aspect of that. And one of the major contributing factors of why we're seeing the rise of statism, because the state is being taught, statism is being taught throughout our education systems, not just at the lower, the secondary levels, but up into the post-secondary and the education in terms of universities and colleges. So what would you do to help create an environment where there's, once again, some actual genuine competition in the marketplace of ideas in terms of education?
Create centers of excellence using the same checkbox, with parents to be able to say that I want my kids to go to the local school down the road, and here's my share of the tax dollars that I take from you to do it. Now, if you were to look at our current education system and how it, and I hate to use the word education, even though it is an education system, it's more of an indoctrination system
Yeah.
to social conformity.
Well, actually, it's kind of it's kind of a hybrid, because you do get some education, but yeah, the indoctrination is definitely part of it.
Well, with two children that have gone through this system and one still in it,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they are not prepared for the real world.
No.
They have no critical thinking skills. They have no entrepreneurial skills. They have no discovery skills. It's all
Yeah.
about regurgitating what's in a book.
Yeah.
Elon Musk decided to start his own school, and he has no grades in that school. And if you've ever looked at his little school model, that's basically what we want to do. Every
Right.
child is different. Every child has special skill sets, learning abilities. Some will never be mathematicians, but they might be the greatest welder or technical person in the world within their own fields.
Yeah.
And our system does not support a gifted child. It does not support a struggling child. It does not support a person that is only going to ever work with their hands, but can make millions of dollars. Because some of my richest friends are in the trades, right? So if we were to attach the funding to the child, just like in 2018, if I'm going to tax you, I'm going to give that control to you in the interim, because that's the best way to do it. And you can, as a parent, will be able to say that, hey, you know what? I'm going to put together 10 people and I'm going to bring in 10 children, and we're going to have no grades in that school, but we're going to follow a curriculum that basic building skills, math, social skills within that group, and also watch what each child develops into, either a academic child or a physical labor child or a engineer child, and we're going to fund it. And by doing that, the parents control and have more control over each one of their children that they know better than anybody else does. Yeah. They know if their children is good in math. They know if their children is gifted in writing or art, and they can tailor that education program for exactly that child. Yeah. And all of that funding would go towards your choice. In the major cities, predominantly, I think people will pick, because they bought houses close to schools, they would pick their local public systems, unless you got some parents that really said that, you know what, it's time to move them from this into this particular field of study. Schools of excellence, science, healthcare, all these things that push a person towards that direction in which their skill sets are perfect for. That's how we fix this system. That's how we create the entrepreneurial spirit, along with our run and sincere desire to deregulate and decentralize as much planning as possible to create the next generation of entrepreneurs that are going to grow this province and make it the best place in the world. That's how we do that through the education system. What we have now is not working. Bill C-67, Jordan Peterson said it is the worst piece of legislation that he's ever seen in regards to grading people. They're grading teachers. Actually have to have graded teachers now on their ability to create this program, which is along the lines of critical race theory. How is that even relevant to an individual's choice in life?
Yeah.
If I want to be any individual, as long as I'm not a violent individual, then I should have that right and belief to be whoever I am, whether it be Mormon, Catholic, Islamic, Christian, Hindu. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Who am I as a leader to tell you as a parent that you are going to take what I think is the best model for your child? No. Decentralize that, make that funding in control of the parents, or have them opt out completely altogether and fund their own education.
Yeah.
Don't pay the taxes on it.
Yeah. Actually, so in addition,
these are things that are going to actually improve the ability of our children to be successful and be entrepreneurs. That's what it's going to do, not the system that we have now. And eventually people are going to realize this.
Yeah. Actually, so in addition to that, and you actually brought it up earlier on when you, in the first part of your answer was, and you brought up Jordan Peterson. And actually, this is something I was listening to him in a couple of his conversations when he was doing his tour about this, but I never got it. It never got to the point because he kind of got distracted, but it's something that piqued my interest. And actually, I'm going to ask you about. So how would you go about if you did, like I say, the Ontario Libertarian Party gained traction, you got support, you got yourself a seat, and you could have affect change through the political system towards the education system. Now, how is there a way? Because to me, the biggest factor there is, like you're saying, accreditation. Now, right now, there's a a gatekeeper type of status in the kind of people who can be accredited. Right now, growing up, and you look like you're about at least my age, if not older, whatever. I know growing up, a lot of the jobs, and even when I went into wasn't really considered construction back then, but driving a forklift at a lumberyard when I was 15 years old, there was no going to school or anything. It was just some guy teaches you, right? You're like an apprentice, right? And it didn't matter whether you went into carpentry or welding or plumbing or electrical or, like I say, or framing. Basically, you just went someone who had the experience, and the only accreditation that mattered is could you perform that task efficiently and better than most other people. And that would, that's how people chose whether you were good at your job or not. And I used to use perfect example, like John Force is a mechanic that works on super or funny cars, right? This guy didn't have no, graduate degree, but the guy could build some of the best engines on the planet. So we know that there are people out there who have amazing abilities and skills. They just don't have that government approved accreditation. But is there a way, some form or function somehow where you can get something that is at least closely aligned to? Because we definitely want a form of accreditation in some degree, I would imagine, in some areas. Now, maybe some fields of study or places, maybe not, right?
No.
But okay, well, actually, perfect. Then go right with it there, Mark. Go ahead, man.
Why should the government tell you what a standard is?
Oh yeah, no, I don't mean a government standard. No, for sure.
Yeah.
No.
So in the sense of a welder,
Right.
let's just pick on a welder for an example.
Okay.
You have to get accredited by the government. Well, why isn't the Welding Association, who accredits their own people, should provide them with the standards in which they can hold their license? The College of Trade needs to go. Each professional body that's out there should be their own professional body, governing and looking after their own people and their own members of that particular trade. And when you do that, what you do is you self-regulate the own industry. You don't want people that don't have an education that is standardized and codified in regards to a welder. What is a welder? What is a Red Seal welder? What do you need to take in that? And then through colleges, you can get those certifications, but you don't need the government to certify that. I can weld anything. And I've never taken a welding class in my entire life. I've learned through YouTube and a whole
Right.
bunch of burning and a whole bunch of metal.
Yeah.
But the idea of a professional standards body should be governed by each industry and each trade out there and should be not regulated whatsoever.
Right.
If you even look at our doctor shortages here, we have a College of Doctors, the CPSO, or the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. If you want to be a doctor in the province of Ontario, you have to get a slot approved by a government place, approved in a government-run institution. Why? Why do we do that? Why do we put 80 to 90 doctors through each year in the province and only have slots for 8 to 12 to 15 of them in the province for a tenure for their I forget what they call it when they do their residency.
Right.
If they don't have a residency, we just wasted all this money and they go down to the States.
Mm-hmm.
So we should have they should have their own professional body outside of the scope of the government to be able to create and train those people in which they belong to that professional body without government interference whatsoever. Because as soon as you bring government regulation into the rule, you bring government influence, and then people that have had to comply with the thousands of healthcare professionals that have spoken out against the COVID measures or the vaccines in this case that have been silenced and censored and kicked out of their professional bodies. Mm. That's why we need to get away from that so that the state can never, ever again take away the individual rights of a doctor to advocate for his patients, because they've done that, because they own it all. And again, this isn't going to take 2 weeks to solve. It's going to take 5 to 10 years to solve. But we have to start doing that now, where we have professional bodies of professional organizations looking after themselves and self-regulating and self-disciplining their members for standards, lack of standards being practiced within the industry. We need to get the government completely out of that whole standardization.
Beautiful. I love the way you think, Mark. So just a couple more areas before we tie this up. Number one, I think this is definitely going to, resonate with the younger people among us. And that's obviously the housing market. And Ontario is one of those provinces that, God damn, that's pretty crazy. Like I say, I lived in Ontario when my parents moved us up there when I was 12. So it was 1982. I was born in 1970. And I remember people like buying homes. So this would have been in the 80s, but it was, 20, 30, 40, 60,000, 70, 80,000, like 100,000. But to see those homes now, right, where they've turned into basically proverbial gold mines. And we won't even have to worry about getting into the underlying about the central bank, but basically like I say, what could you do to help alleviate this housing market issue that is massively affecting old people as well, of course, but in particular, the younger people among us who are trying to, start families and careers and stuff it's definitely playing a profound effect. And I hear lots of people saying, well, yes, you can rent, there's times when renting is a good option. But like I say, the housing market, especially in Ontario, is so far outside the reach of the typical person or even the average couple that it's elusive. It's like a unicorn. It's something that they heard existed, but they'll never actually experience for themselves. So what could you do, if you did get the opportunity to have that political position and the opportunity to help alleviate the problems as it pertains to the housing market in Ontario?
Property rights, straight up. 10 kids get together, invest $10,000, rent a piece of land, put a trailer on it, put a tiny home on it, and have no debt. That's how we get these people today, because it is kind of the province of Ontario that's really impacting the price of houses, but it's really the federal government, the fiat banking system, and the whole way that money is created in Canada, which needs inflationary measures. My first house was $32,000. This one that I bought now was $369,000. The one that I bought before this was $194,000 and sold 15 years later for $480,000.
Right.
So how do we get those kids that have no blue collar jobs that are available because of the regulations into the point where they can actually save money to be able to buy a house? How can these kids making $15 an hour, and I'm speaking to you 16, 17, 18 to 25 to 30-year-olds who are paying absorbent amount of rent prices for artificial inflation that has taken us another cycle of growth of explosive housing markets and inaccessible rent. But remove the Rent Control Act. That's one other thing. But how do we get these kids to be able to build wealth? Because it's going to be very difficult for them to build wealth if they don't have the ability to, say, come out to with 5 other friends, or build a community where they can put 100 mobile homes in it and even pay for a porta potty service, or set up like a provincial campground, a communal shower. And that everybody pays a little bit a month to pay the cost of that, to have, the pump once a month and the well service and all that stuff. That's how they're going to build wealth. But you can't do that. You can't do that. The health code, the regulations. Why can't someone live on Crown land and save $10,000 to buy their land, or $50,000 to buy their land, and somewhere else, and then as they live in a trailer or a tiny home, and they can afford to put in a foundation, afford the next year to put up the walls, afford to close in the house and then build. Well, those regulations and rules and processes that are in place right now stop people from doing that. They are forced into the fact that they have to come up with X amount of dollars for a down payment, and you can't even get a construction loan for a young couple to be able to build a house over a period of time, because the banks want it built at this time so that they have the equity and investment. Our forefathers, and right up until the 70s, would literally build a tar paper shack and live in it, build up their wealth, eventually improve that house, and there was never a need to go to the bank for anything. That's where we need to get back to, where we need to give people land, as far as I'm concerned, cheaply, to be able to go out there and pioneer themselves into a spot where they can, build up cash reserve, build up wealth, where they're not paying these absorbent amount of rents, or they're not getting sucked into the 20-year mortgage cycle of a bank, where they can try to save money to build as much as they can, what they need for their time. If you're a young couple making, maybe $60,000 a year, you live in that tiny house on that piece of property for 10 years, and you save a whole bunch of money. And now all of a sudden you have money to go build your house, no loans, no nothing, no debt. And then you sell your tiny home to somebody else who does that same thing. But those regulations don't exist for people to be able to do that. And that's what we need to do for the youth of today, to be able to get into the market of developing and building wealth, and deregulating as much as the roadblocks in their face to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually one of the big, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's one of the major factors is, as you know, on the macro level, on the big, the currency level, the central bank level, there's lots of contributing factors to this housing market. But I think even just down at the local or in the provincial level, a major factor, I mean, just simple number crunching, and anyone can do a little basic supply and demand, right? So we have in excess of 400,000 people who are becoming Canadians every year, whether they're coming to this country or just they've come to the country prior years, or have just finally now gotten their citizenship. But that puts them in a position where they can now start entering into the housing market themselves. And when you have that large of a number of people without that, matching level of increased in building, right? I mean, it's just so basic, simple understanding that any developer or anyone at the political level, like I say, local, provincial, or federal, should understand is the old law of supply and demand. If you have a massive influx of people who are vying for homes, and you're not building at least enough infrastructure to keep on pace or on par with that level of immigration, or even just natural Canadian citizens that are looking to get into the homes, that's a major issue. So that's actually something I think that in Ontario, if you were the Libertarian Party took power, I believe that's something that would be under your purview, and a position that you could do is to open up and expand, the ability for these developers to actually develop at a pace that at least keeps the housing market from getting much worse than it already is, right?
Open up for developers and stuff like that. They're all bound by the same municipal rules and same provincial regulations. I don't know if that's the answer. I think the answer is to give up land and allow people to, even if you moved into a tent trailer, for them to be able to put together the money. Now, like, how do you save for a house today that's $500,000 and you need 5% or 10% down when you're paying $1,200 a month, making $15 an hour for rent? How do you do that? And if you could put kids, like in the Ottawa area here, we got a place called the Marlborough Forest. And there's, large tracts of land out there where they could actually go out there and live for a summer in a tent trailer to save enough money then rent an apartment in the wintertime and then go back out and live in these public areas. That's one way of doing it without, absorbing debt to be able to decide. But how do these kids do that? So why can't we ease the regulations where they could actually do that? Or why don't we even take a look at the immigration that you said, which is a federal issue? 50 to 70 years ago, when the land patent grants ended, you used to be able to come to Canada as a new immigrant, and they'd give you a plot of land, and they said, in the next 2 years, we'll come back and see, here's your 40 acres for $10, and you have to build a suitable dwelling, not a code dwelling, and you had to till and farm 15 acres of land. So, and 2 years' time, the government came back and they were deeded with that land. Now we've taken land where it's become a commodity, and it makes it very, very difficult without a good paying blue collar job for the youth of today, making $15 an hour, whatever industry that it is, and paying exorbitant amounts of rent because of fiat banking systems. So how do we develop that wealth? And there's a way to do it. And it should be, even if you could go and rent on someone's land and live there, and even, like I said, rent a porta potty, if that's your desire to buy a house and you're willing to live like that, it's illegal to do so. So why can't we make that a way for the youth of today to be able to save the money that they need, even if they have to go into a mortgage to be able to do that, or save the money enough to buy, 10 acres of land outside, or, an acre of land outside, and let them live in a tiny home for 2 years. That's how we're going to help the youth of today, besides deregulating and opening up industry and providing more jobs in the sense of using our own resources and get back into manufacturing. But how are those kids? That's the only way that we're going to be able to do that, to make them wealthy and be able to develop the money that they need to either get a down payment or buy a piece of land. It's very difficult. I got 2 children that are under 25, and it's very difficult for them to save the kind of money that my wife and I did 25 years ago to buy our first house.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult.
Oh, I know. Actually, both of my sons are actually both here in New Brunswick, and my youngest son, he was going to be here anyways. He had made that choice, but my oldest son actually chose to move it back here for that very reason, actually. And actually, him and his girlfriend both. Well, she was one that worked in long-term care that had her job affected and stuff, but they both made good money. They, both, work in occupations where they make decent amount of money, but neither of them were comfortable with even trying to look for a place in Ontario. So I know what you mean. And they had a lot of, like, I grew up, and we raised our kids partially in Ontario, so they had lots of friends and lots of connections in that province. But I'm with you there. It's terrible for the young people how devastating it is, and the kind of lengths they have to go to just even get their foot in the market. But anyways, so I got one more other area I wanted to cover for sure, to at least get this all covered, because these are, I think, really important things that most people want to hear from. And obviously, this is going to be another area where Ontario punches way above its weight, is debts and deficits, right? So I remember years ago, I don't even remember, Mark, that's been quite a few years ago, might be 10 years ago, actually, were Ontario's debt at the time. And I remember thinking, wow, is that real? Because you hear about California being such a basket case in the United States, which, economically it can be and has been. But I believe at that particular junction, I think it was actually under the Win Liberals at the time, where Ontario's debt was actually double of what it was.
State of California.
And the state of California, which that's not something to brag about, right? When you're so massively indebted to the tune where you actually can brag not just a little bit, but you're doubling up on even California type levels. And that is something that has a profound effect. And I use the expression, and some people get mad at me for using it. I get it, because it's a very sensitive subject, but this intergenerational theft. But basically what it is, a lot of these debts and deficits are people that were alive a lot longer than the people that are younger today, who have built up the debts and deficits, and they're not going to be here. That's just right. That's just reality. They're not going to be here to pay them off. So what happens? And to me, that was a weird thing. And that should have been something that part of the golden rule. I don't care when they started severing ties or manipulating the gold standard. At the very least, I can't believe all these people, no one thought of taking this kind of stuff into equation, that this kind of intergenerational theft is going to have really, 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 really negative implications going forward for not just certain people, but the entire society at large. So what are your thoughts, and what could you do in terms of affecting the debts and deficits and the kind of burden, the kind of load that's going to be placed on the shoulders of our kids and grandkids.
So that is a big problem. And right now it's about $2.5 billion a month in interest. And if you ask that question, who are we paying that interest to? That's a question everybody should ask.
Yeah.
Who are we paying? Just the interest payment alone. That's not the debt servicing payment. $2.5 billion a month the government has to tax before we even make the car payment on the debt. That's just the interest payment. But if we leave taxation at everything exactly at the rate it is right now and cut government by 50%, cut the bureaucracy.
Well, actually, before you go on, actually, but could we just answer that question that you were like? So I would say the bondholders, right?
Who are the bondholders? The people that want us to remain in debt and stay in debt because they're the wealthy 1%, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that's a whole other issue in itself. But we don't have a problem. We have a problem of spending. And what we need to do is stop spending more than what we take in. And that includes any economic upturn or downturn that we go through where you have to either reduce or cut or delineate services. If we were to, I use healthcare as an example. Say for the Ottawa region here, it's $6.8 billion is what we would get. If we only spend $5 billion of it and give it back, then that debt can go, that surplus can go back to the actual government to pay down the debt. It has to be paid down. So there will be a balancing act of reducing government, savings programs to make sure that we are trying to save as much so that we can pay off the debt and the deficit as quickly as possible. It's not going to take 5 years. It's not going to take 10 years. It's not going to take 15 years. It'll probably take 20 years to eliminate Ontario's debt. But it has to be done because if you look at Canada's debt curve from 1972 right up to 2022, you'll see that that debt curve is a steady climb. And I don't care what government has been in power, conservative, liberal, or whatever it is, whether it be provincial or federal, all those debts have continued to rise. So when someone says they're a fiscal conservative or, I don't know, whatever they call a liberal, it's not true. And if you look at Canada's regulations and policies that have come into place as the debt has risen both provincially and federally, new programs have come into place. Carbon tax, GST tax for the roads and services tax that everybody forget about under Gretchen, 4.3 cents a liter, supposed to collect it from the GST that was supposed to help for infrastructure. Now we're talking about carbon taxes to pay for infrastructure. Well, what happened to that money that we had in that case? So when the government comes up with a program, they create a narrative around climate change. As far as I'm concerned, is a fear narrative so that you will feel good about paying more in taxation. And the test of that is that when was the last time you heard of a personal income tax increase in the province of Ontario or the country of Canada? They haven't. Because what they've done is they've brought in all these little tiny taxes and market regulations and market fees that have taken away from your personal ability to earn more money. Mm-hmm. And as they keep increasing the debt, they have to keep coming up with programs to be able to pay for it. Carbon taxation on the federal level is servicing the debt, which went from $2 billion a month in interest under the federal level to $3 billion, almost $3.2 billion a month in interest payments alone. So until we start reducing that debt, we can't even change some of the taxation policies that we have without severely cutting services. And you can't severely cut services right away. You have to look at what is no longer needed, no longer brings value, reduce that, and then also get better with the money that we have that we're assigning to our education, to our healthcare, to be able then to try to find savings within those and then pay off the debt. It's not an easy solution, but it is absolutely possible because anybody with a credit card who's paid it off has done it themselves by self-sacrificing and not spending more than what they had coming in. And the province of Ontario needs to do that. We can't keep going. Eventually it's going to be that, okay, we own all your property, nobody has anything, and all that is now going to be eliminate the debt. If you believe,
you'll be happy.
Yeah, yeah. You'll be happy and own nothing. World
Yeah.
Economic Forum. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Well, anyways, like I say, Mark, this has been a great interview. I kind of figured, like I said, I didn't know much. I know you're a libertarian, so that was basically enough basis for me, anyways. But yeah, I was hoping that you would be able to articulate your thoughts properly, get the proper kind of information out there to people, because that to me is the most important thing. Is you have to show that you're not just against something. It's easy to be against something, to rebel against something. I mean, come on, we've done that since we were kids, right? But what do you have to offer up as an alternative, right? It's okay to be the rebel, but you got a cause, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, Mark and the Libertarian Party, or the Ontario Libertarian Party, has a plan, and that's proof. Well, the proof is in the pudding. And like I say, folks, anyone that's watching this, I didn't cover it as much in this interview, but I wanted to actually get Mark's own voice. But if you want, I'm going to have all the links to not just the Ontario Libertarian Party's platform, but I'm also going to have that link and it'll be in all the description of the stream, to that Charter of Rights. Because once again, it doesn't matter to me. And don't just consume this stuff for yourself. This is a time where you can do it in a non-confrontational way. Just kind of, maybe use that as a means to engage with someone that maybe is on the fence, or maybe they're just one of those people who are apolitical and maybe don't typically vote, because that's the one thing that we have to take into account as libertarians too. There's 14 million people that showed up to vote, and under the last, I don't know if that was the number for the last one or for the one for one of Harper's one, but I remember covering it at the time. And there was 14 million Canadians. There was at the time 24 million eligible Canadians to vote. 14 million of them voted for all the different parties, and 10 million of them stayed home. So what that tells you, folks, is even if you can't reach the people that are in your community or in your household, or your friends or neighbors who are dead set on voting for that liberal or that conservative, right? Or that NDP or that Green Party, well, don't get too discouraged, because, like I say, there's 10 million Canadians, or somewhere in and around that area, right? 40% roughly of this population of people who don't vote at all. And these are people who, like I say, and these are people in the abstract. They're people that are part of all of our lives. Each one of us knows someone like this. And like I say, don't just absorb this information that Mark's given to you now and that's available and accessible to you, because chances are you're probably already fairly knowledgeable. Try to find out ways, be unique in your own person, because you're going to know the kind of people you're dealing with, and show them these kind of platforms and this information, or help them to understand that libertarianism isn't what CBC says, right? Libertarianism does not mean a bunch of far right extremists. No, actually, libertarianism is basically what a classical liberal was, a couple hundred years ago. It's just we expand upon what the premises of what being freedom is, and we're trying to advance this. Actually, libertarians are the true progressives, right? We're actually trying to bring about true progress in terms of what is this freedom, what is this liberty thing, what is this stuff all about, right? And actually, libertarians are the ones that are trying to progress that forward and advance it in the 21st century. Whereas the establishment, they're not doing so much of that, and they're actually keeping us pitted against each other and fighting constantly. So I think, like I say, the libertarian platform is not just good for the political sense, but it's good for all of us in our own social and economic lives. And like I say, it's a good area where the rest of them, the establishment, are trying to tear us apart. The libertarian platform is a beautiful area to bring us together. And I think that's what Mark and others, and I'll reach out to Keith McIntyre. He's another guy that's a leader of the Federal Libertarian Party. And yeah, I'm going to try to reach out to more libertarians as the days go by here, so that I can discuss these things, because I think it's really important to have these people out there, and not just on the ballots, but getting the information out there. So Mark, if you just wanted, like I say, take however long you want, and say, get your message out there, whatever you want to say, and just mention out what the date is in June when the election is. Because really, at the end of the day, we're like, not only do we want to have this conversation, but this is leading up to something that's really going to take place, and that's the Ontario election that's going to take place in June. And you're going to put yourself out there, and so are the other members of that party, and give Ontarians an actual choice for freedom and liberty. So go right ahead there, Mark.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'd like to go back to what you said about voter apathy and the amount of people that didn't show up. That's by design. Politicians are hoping that you say, my vote don't make a difference. Every vote makes a difference. And even if you go out and protest vote and vote for me because you don't want to vote for anybody else, or any libertarian or whoever it is, I'm a veteran. Every vote matters. I don't care if it's for the Communist Party of Ontario, the Liberal Party. I don't care who you vote for. Please get out and vote, because that is true representation. Secondary to that, if you're from Ontario and you want to join as a candidate, please join up, become a candidate, get involved with the party, read up on the platform, reach out to me. I will come speak anywhere in the province of Ontario that I have at least 3 to 4 days notice to be able to come speak at an event. We believe in the ability of the people of Ontario to control more of their own destiny, to be, we trust in the people of Ontario. We trust that you will do what is best for you, and we will support that right to do that. We believe in freedoms. We believe in property rights. We believe in the idea of democracy, but where you hold the power, not where I hold the power as a provincial leader. And we are going to take steps, if we can get to power with a majority government, to make you more powerful than me, so that I become a talking head that you only have to listen to, because your rights are more protected than my words and legislation that can make you do things that you shouldn't have to do. That's what libertarianism is about. That's what we are trying to achieve. And I don't care if we get 1 million votes or 5 votes. You won't find a single libertarian that won't stop trying to achieve that. And that's where I'm at. And I thank you very much for your time and my technological skills of being late. I appreciate it. And I would come back anytime and even do a live if you want to.
Yeah, for sure.
Take questions from across Canada.
Yeah.
Jacques Bordeaux is the federal leader, and Keith McIntyre is the BC leader.
Oh, BC, right. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
my bad. Yes, sorry, you're right. Yes, Keith's the BC. So yeah, actually, and I'll probably be reaching out to those two gentlemen as well. And like I say, Mark, really appreciate you coming on here today. And don't worry about being a few minutes late. That's not even the slightest of a big deal, because one thing I've never had a problem with is filling any void or gap in time. I have a few people have said, I had a teacher back when I was a kid said I had verbal diarrhea, I guess. But anyways, it keeps me entertained and others as well. But anyways, thanks for having this chat for me, and thanks for all the people who joined into it. And have yourself a great rest of the Sunday. We'll see you next time. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.